Welcome to the Woven Energy Podcast with me, Joseph Sikora, and Damon Smith. We are back after a while, and we're here to talk about shamanism from the ground up. So, today we've titled this episode, Why Shamanism Needs to Keep Reinventing Itself. And I think we're just going to have a bit of a chat, Damon, I think, today, aren't we? Just sort of ease our way back into it. But I thought one of the things that might be interesting, I want to get your take on it, is part of the reason, I mean, I know there's several reasons, but part of the reason why we haven't recorded an episode in a while is perhaps we've reached a point where, you know, we're approaching shamanism. It's a very disciplined, it's a very nuanced, it's a very active discipline. And perhaps it's reached a point where on a podcast, it's extremely difficult to kind of get across that aspect of it or go deep down those avenues with it. And you know, I mean, we can talk about shamanism until the cows come home. There's so many areas we can explore, but the actual core of it, what we're trying to actually teach, it's difficult, right?
You can't put it into anything. Ultimately, I mean, we have a few patrons. Bless us, bless them. You know, some of our patrons who've looked after us for a long time are now in what we call the Grove, which is a thing with videos, but there aren't as many videos in there as I would like. And actually, video just takes you a little step further. My work has exploded recently. The COVID-19 thing has absolutely made my workload skyrocket. It was not in a bad way. I'm enjoying it. Cambridge is a great place. I really like the people there, and I'm having a good time there. But the workload is very high in terms of the things that I need to get done. So I haven't had much time to work on things around woven energy, though I do fully intend to in the future to get those things moving. But my point there is that even if the Grove was up and running and we had lots of videos in there about spirit dance and all this kind of stuff, even then it's not enough, because shamanism is about stuff that underlies the surface of things. It's like there's the world as you see it and the things that you do in the world, and shamanism is not really about any of those things. It's about what underlies them. It's about, if you think of the world, I think as we've said before, if you think of the world as light, what we said is everything in the universe is energy from a shamanistic point of view. Well, light is a form of energy, so you can think of energy in terms of light. Yeah. What's the light bulb? That's the question in terms of shamanism. That's the question. And how do you come in contact with a light bulb as a shaman, metaphorically speaking? And that's a tough question to answer in any medium, book. It's a tough question in person, but I think the traditional sort of shaman apprentice kind of model is the easiest. But even within that model, even when, like we used to have in the old days, we used to have a lot of time together. And even within that model, it's still hard because ultimately it's all down to the person learning. It's all down to the person becoming a shaman to uncover that for themselves.
I mean, when we did spend time together, I remember most of the things we did. When we put aside certain sessions, instead of doing martial arts, we'd say, right, we're doing quote unquote shamanism. You'd just take us into a woods somewhere. I remember there was a place where there was a big lake as well. But you'd basically just say, right, go stand over there. What do you feel? Go stand over by the lake and come back to me in half an hour. And there'd be not really very much beyond that. So it's very much an experiential thing. And
Absolutely.
I think you can plant the flags down, can't you? And you were very good at that. I mean, it's one of the things that I think attracted me more to the way you taught than anything else, because it wasn't very definitive. It wasn't, a do this, do that instruction manual, which it's so easy to fall into. But very much you find that there's not as much substance there, and it's much better to find this stuff out for yourself.
Yeah, that brings us neatly onto the subject of this particular podcast, because one of the things, the ironies, the paradoxes is, in a settled civilized society, we've said that shamanism itself didn't develop in order to support life in the kind of social context that we live in. It didn't develop to support life in modern nations, modern cities, countries with millions, tens of millions, thousands, even a billion people. It didn't develop for that context at all. It developed to support the survival of small groups of hunter-gatherers, 10 people kind of thing, self-organizing groups in a world that was very devoid of people. If you want to go back to even 500,000 years ago, you can think of the entire world's population. That's everybody in this very large planet. From a human being's point of view, from our perspective, it's a large planet, was smaller than the population of Manchester. Yeah. The entire world. Yeah. And you think about it in that context, that you need very different tools. And one of the things that when you look at that old-fashioned, raw kind of natural shamanism among hunter-gatherer peoples today, those vanishingly small number of them, there's like the Evenks in Siberia, and the San people in Africa. They're very, very rare, these groups, but what they also have in common, they live in very extreme environments. Now, if you went back 500,000 years, that wouldn't be true. You would find you would find some people in extreme environments, but you would find groups that behaved similarly to those people, but they would be living in much more friendly environments. For instance, like the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia, this type of location. Their lives would be much easier as hunter-gatherers. And of course, it's the civilized people who've pushed them out of those areas into the fringes. But, one of the things I think that often gets overlooked is people think that way of living that those people have has something to do with these extreme locations that they live in, Inuit in the Arctic Circle. No, it has nothing to do with obviously some of the things that they do, how they keep warm when it's cold and how they keep cool when it's hot and all that kind of stuff have something to do with the environment they live in. But their shamanism has nothing to do with that. It's a fundamental part of what they do. And what I'd suggest is it's possible to imagine or visualize a group of hunter-gatherer people who live in an incredibly benign environment. An environment where the land is very fertile. You're easily gathering a lot of things that you can eat, and there's loads of animals around to hunt. And that is also the context in which shamanism grew up. And that context just doesn't exist in this world anymore. And so I think that one of the reasons why shamanism has to reinvent itself through the ages, and present itself to the world in new forms, is the fact that we don't do that stuff anymore. And this is where we get this distinction, or I use this distinction between shamanism on the one hand and esotericism on the other hand. Esotericism being shamanism in settled civilized societies. It has to change itself. It has to reinvent itself so that people can get a handle on it. Because honestly speaking, raw shamanism in its raw form is completely... it flies 100,000 feet over the heads of the average person in our society. Not to say that transformed into some form of esotericism, it doesn't. But when people want to understand shamanism, when people want to understand shamanism, they want to understand what it is, and they want a quick, simple answer to that. And then they want to know what benefits are they personally going to derive from it, typically. And they want a super quick answer to that. And then they'll make a decision whether it's of interest to them. Yeah. If you approach shamanism in that way, I tell you right now, shamanism isn't of interest to you. You got it all wrong already, just by asking those questions.
There's also the common misconception that shamanism is a nice thing. Shamanism is like a benign religion-esque. Even if you want to go down the spiritual side of it, it's not a nice thing. It can definitely make you uncomfortable, to say the least. It can
have nice outcomes. Yeah, it can have nice outcomes. I mean, for instance, what's happened to you in terms of your life? I don't know what you feel like, but I feel like your encounter with shamanism has improved your quality of life, not because the shamanism itself improved your quality of life, but it's the repercussions of it, isn't it?
Well,
Shamanism
it's
always
my
has a
encounter.
purpose.
It's my encounter with the overall overarching, almost like a theme or whatever it is. I wouldn't say it was shamanism at its core because. Well, it depends what you mean by that term.
Well, what I mean is
definitely the way you taught it, and definitely the way I was exposed to it, provided me with a lot of stability in a time of my life when I was very unstable, and I was at a very I was in a very strange place. So yeah, you know.
But also I would say that you're quite a successful person now. By most people's definition, I mean, YouTubers are seem to be the heroes of modern society, don't they? And congratulations on passing 200,000 subscribers, but it's a very impressive, it has to be said. Yeah. But you know, if I think of the Joe I met, and now I think of YouTuber Joe, it's almost and I'm not saying this in an unkind way. It's almost a different person, you know.
Absolutely, you know. But this leads us on to a very interesting rabbit hole we could go down with the title of the podcast. You know, shamanism needs to reinvent itself. Well, you, Damon, as you are fully aware, have reinvented the way you teach us shamanism in various ways, and it's only relatively recently that you've even called it shamanism. Yeah, you know, I mean, when you first started teaching this, to me, I came in what we called the Armabella days. This was the latest iteration of Damon's way of teaching us shamanism.
Yeah, trying to interest people in shamanism, absolutely. Because do you know what that is? When I was first bowled over by shamanism, this would be, I'd started practicing it, and so this would be maybe the year 1987-ish onwards. I'd been absolutely bowled over by it. It had revolutionized my life. And I saw, I was in a different world from where I'd been. Say, if you go back to 1982, between 82 and 87, I went to a different planet. Basically, I don't mean I literally went to a different planet. I don't want any hippie types listening to things that I went off this mission. What I mean is I saw the world very differently and in a much better way. The world was vibrant. It was immediate. It was beautiful, absolutely stunning. And I guess you could just say that's moving.
It's like you've added the flavour to life.
But I was so enthused about it, and I did use the word shamanism back in those days when I was trying to interest other people in it, when I was trying to enthuse other people in it. And to say I had my success was underwhelming would be an understatement. I got absolutely nowhere in terms of interesting other people in what I was doing. And so that's what set me on the way to, because I know shamans have reinvented it. I know I have a lot of knowledge about some of the Japanese shamans, for instance. People like Nakayama Miki. I've done a huge amount of research around her traditions, and therefore I almost feel like I know and I understand how she was thinking about trying to reinvent her shamanism. She didn't call it shamanism. She called it Honmichi, which means the natural path, which is good to me. That's a good term to describe shamanism. But she used lots of different terms. She used the term Yoki-Yusan, which means playing in the mountains. You know, it's a kind of metaphoric term, right? And through understanding why she'd done that with some success, at the time, she got a lot of people interested in shamanism at that particular point in time. But then, as the zeitgeist of Japan moved on, so we're talking about the late 19th century, right? The late 1800s. As the zeitgeist moved on into the 20th century, you got the modernization of Japan going through into the 1920s, and then in the 1930s and 40s, you've got the rise of the sort of ultra-nationalist, militaristic movement in Japan. And then after the war, after World War II, I mean, you had this rise of a sort of Western-leaning democracy. All of those things are not really conducive to the way that she had packaged up shamanism for the late 1900s, for the late 1800s and late 19th century. The way she'd have packaged it had been and presented it to the world had been very effective for that time. And this is one of the reasons why shamanism needs to keep reinventing itself, is because shamanism is really really bad at talking to civilized people. It's very, very bad at presenting its ideas to people because their vocabulary, the language that those people use, has, certainly in terms of English, has had all of the shamanistic terminology stripped out of it hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And so there are no words. We've said this a lot. There are no words. We have to invent words like Chilisti, don't we? When a shamanistic language, Mongol, for instance, Baktamste Sab, they got a word for it. Yeah, they got more than one word for it. Yeah. But we don't. Also, words like Toshaltin in Mongol, we haven't got a word for that. Gukuk, we haven't got a word for that. And we come up with the best terms that we can to try and map onto these things. But actually, in doing those mappings, so for instance, I often in Armabella, which Armabella, for those that don't know, Armabella was one of my many attempts to package up shamanism by just coming up with a whole bunch of words that were they sounded English but weren't. Yeah, so Armabella itself sounded Western. Armor sort of means weapon, and Bella like beautiful in the Western languages, so a beautiful weapon, which is one of the things that I view shamanism as. Shamanism is a tool set. Shamanism is a set of techniques. It's like a weapon but it's a beautiful weapon, and the things that it does generally have great repercussions, like Creative Piano Academy, for instance. These nice things come out of it. It's not particularly beautiful itself. So a lot of these words that I use, like Chilisti, like Neoteny, and then we repurpose the word grace for Gukuk, they're fine, but except that when it becomes a common English word like grace, a lot of people have something already attached meaning to that isn't the same meaning as a shamanistic concept like Gukuk. And so this is one of the reasons why you have to reinvent yourself. Of course, there's a major problem in reinventing yourself. And that happened with Miki's tradition. It happens in all the traditions, but it happened with Miki's tradition, which is as the zeitgeist moves on, the meaning of those words that you're using, that you have used to package up your shamanistic bundle, if you like, for presentation to people. What's the purpose? It's just try to keep it alive, right? We're just trying to pass it on to other people. The way that you've packaged it up in order to try and help people understand it is temporal. It has to be tuned because it's so difficult. You have to use inference, you have to use allegory, you have to use metaphor, you have to use all these difficult language techniques, and then not preserved as the zeitgeist of any given society moves on. So what I mean is, Miki tuned her shamanism for the time and successfully passed it on to others. I tried with Armabella to tune our shamanism for our time, but I'm a much less able person than Miki.
Well, I mean,
but I did have some success with it. I had some success with it. I got Joe.
You got a few others as well. I mean,
yeah, absolutely,
it's like,
absolutely.
And I'm curious as well to explore. You mentioned back in the 90s, the 80s, when you discovered this stuff for yourself, and you went through the revelation, and you changed, right?
Big time.
I'm curious from a personal point of view if you experienced resistance from any groups of friends that you were with.
Oh, it was awful.
It was like
it was awful.
Because, it's fascinating. When I look back on it, it's really, really interesting to see the dynamic, because I can see now from both sides. Now, when you're in a group, it's almost like the group's a jigsaw, right? And you in the way you are inside that group, you form a piece of the whole picture. And so when you come along and you start behaving slightly differently, or you start disrupting how other people perceive you to fit within that group, then it shatters the illusion of what that group really is. And you get these very strange adverse reactions to what you're doing. Now,
absolutely.
But a lot of it, and the other side to it is you do, for me, you do go to the extreme. When you're learning something new, you go extreme. So I was a bit weird right? The way I was. But I can also see it from the other point of view that, well, in fact, Joseph's joined a dangerous cult, and he's getting lost to these evil people that were leading me down a dark path. There was that side of it as well, and I can kind of take a step back and see both sides of it, why they thought that. But
I had that. I mean, I quite. I had that definitely from people around me. At one point in time, my mum was very worried about me. This going back to those days. Though she's a very broad-minded person and very supportive in general, so that wasn't so much of an issue. I mean, my biggest issue, as you know, was not with my family. My biggest issue in those regards was with my martial arts students. They just wished Damon would stop doing this crazy shamanism thing and just knuckle down and teach us martial arts. Will you stop talking about shamanism? That was kind of the vibe I got for a long time off my martial arts students. As you know, I teach more than one martial art, so I've got a bunch of martial arts students for different things. And that I still have that today, let alone back then. And so, it varies from person to person, and as I think as a lot of people come to understand it, their attitude towards it changes. But yeah, I still have that today, let alone back then. But it was particularly bad when I first started off.
It's that point where you start doing things a bit differently, and I think a lot of people listening to this podcast, if they do start to engage in this stuff and they do start to experience shamanism on some sort of a fundamental level, that they might come across that aspect of it as well. So it's something to be.
So yeah, I mean, I'll give you a specific example of that. As my interest increased, and also you handle things badly when you're dealing with cultural issues like that, which is effectively what it is, right? It's kind of culture shock. Your friends around you are having culture shock. And I had good friends in the martial arts community. At one time, I was very, very serious about my karate, for instance. And then I think it was about 1989, a good friend of mine sort of pulled me to one side. I was doing less karate so I could go and practice my weird stuff, as they saw it. And I was sort of basically stopping doing karate altogether. That's an extreme reaction, but like I say, I wasn't thinking straight. Of course you could do shamanism in karate, but I wasn't nowhere near as experienced as I am now back in 1989. And there was no need for that. I could do, you can do, once you get the handle on shamanism, you can do it in anything, can't you? You can do it in croquet or, whatever, some strange game, curling, anything you want, But back then I had to stop doing this stuff. I had to explore this stuff. I hadn't met my main teacher yet. I met him in 91, 92. So I hadn't met him yet. But anyway, this really good friend of mine pulled me aside and says, "You're going to regret this." That meaning that leaving karate, I was going to regret it, because I was the instructor of a university karate club. It's a nice thing to be, an old karate club as well, the one that'd been around a long time, even by that time. So there's a lot of kudos involved in being the instructor of that club, And my friend said, "You're going to regret this." And from 1989 to this day, I'm still waiting on regretting it. I'm sure one day I will. So that's the kind of reaction. That was a really good friend, and they weren't happy, basically. So that is the kind of thing. But on the other hand,
and it's coming from a place of compassion as well, isn't it? It's like they don't mean anything bad by it. It's a concern. It's a concerning thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, there is something to be concerned about, which is when you package something up, the first generation often get it. This happened with Mickey. And maybe this has happened with me. The first generation is small number of people, which is manageable, right? And they sort of get it. Got Paul with his stuff that he's doing. You've done a bunch of stuff out of it. And got John and my long-term students, Harry and Phil. These guys, and even some of my Ben and Glenn, these guys, Mike, I've passed on a lot of stuff to a bunch of people now, and more recently I got people like Bernard and Brett and and so on, So I managed to pass on to what I call a lot of people. It's not a lot of people. It's, a couple of handfuls of people. And more recently, this Tammo as well, So it does go on, but it's on that small scale kind of thing, which is pretty much where Mickey started. Her first generation of students got it, but that's not how it became big. She did some packaging, but actually it was the next generation, the one after her course students, the third, if you count Mickey as the first generation, the second generation, a lot of those guys got it. It was the third generation. Those are the guys who actually made it super popular. How did they make it super popular? They packaged it. They took the packaging too far, basically. They packaged it up and they exotericized it. They moved it from gaining a shaman is somebody who comes to an understanding of nature or what underlies nature in order to help other people, to here is something to believe. And actually, that's where the hundreds of thousands of followers came from. It was the third generation. It wasn't Mickey herself. It was packaging it further, exotericizing it. And you see this again and again. And so there's a danger in reinventing shamanism in order to talk to people about it. It's very, very easy to misrepresent through dumbing down the language that they're using in order to easily explain it. So I got that criticism a lot in Japanese traditions in general, not just Mickey's tradition, but I had that criticism from people. I tend not to like the English translations of any of it. I'm not just talking about Mickey stuff. I mean, there's Bunjio Kawate stuff, there's all the PL stuff, all that kind of stuff. When I translate that stuff into English, when I use words around it, I'm very, very careful what words I use, and they are not the quote-unquote official words of the organizations, the many organizations that back those traditions. They tend to use more Christian English.
They let their displeasure known to you, Damon, as well.
Absolutely. The amount of pressure there's been on me over the years in that stuff is not real, because it gets to the point where when they've been misrepresenting for so long, it ends up in the dictionary, It ends up in the actual dictionary. What I mean, for instance, the Japanese English dictionary. It ends up with this word, goes to this translation, and then the next generation of Japanese people growing up learning English, they're using that dictionary, and they think that when they say something in Japanese, it means the same thing in English. In the context of the Shinshiko, 99 times out of 100, it absolutely doesn't, even though it says that in the dictionary. And so this is the issue. It's very, very easy to dumb something down. And I think that the one thing that I did do with Armabella is I didn't dumb it down too much.
There's another thing I wanted to talk to you as well, because Armabella, when I look back on it now, especially in the context of talking about shamanism in general on this podcast, Armabella was, and I hate to use the term, but it was shamanism stroke self-development. So I was wondering how you would reconcile.
But I see that as the same thing, mate. The thing is, as I said, okay, shamanism is a set of techniques, right? But esotericism is what can we do with shamanic technique to support our new lives in settled civilized society. And in that context, one of the things we can do is a kind of personal development that helps us to enrich our lives, helps us to come closer to nature, but also helps us just to do things a bit more successfully. I mean, we all have done okay, haven't we? We're not, you've got your whole famous, semi-famous YouTuber thing going on. My consulting stuff still goes on, has been going on for 20 years and has absolutely exploded. That came out of this as well. My consulting business that's been running successfully for 20 years now.
Yeah.
I never would have done that if I hadn't encountered this stuff. That wouldn't have happened. That wasn't me, and I know the kind of job I would have been doing. I'd probably been a technician somewhere. I'd been a good technician probably, but that's a job I would have been doing. But I wouldn't have been able to help other people other than probably by fixing broken stuff. I wouldn't have given them much more help than that. And I like to help people in a broader portfolio of things. The world of business is very, very complex. It's an interesting world. And also the idea that business can be fun, that it can be enjoyable, that you can get more than simply your salary out of working for an organization, and that an organization can get more than simply the revenue they generate from you being there out of you being there. It's a great and difficult and complex environment for me to practice my shamanic technique. And that inevitably is a form of personal development. If you look at what's a good way, if you're a member of a team, what's a good way to be on a team? Well, a lot of people think, a team is just a collection of individuals. And, often people put what we call I-shaped teams together, which means that each person on a team has one skill and they're all different skills, that's not a very healthy environment. And, I do my work. If it's a software development team and I'm a tester, I do the test work, and the software developer does the development work, and the business analyst does the business analysis work, and the systems person does the systems work. It's not very healthy. And, Takeuchi Nonaka, two great business experts. Takeuchi is actually, I think, professor of business strategy at Harvard. Those guys, they looked at what made successful organizations on the one hand more successful than mediocre organizations on the other. And this is one of the things they identified. They call it multi-learning, which is that people are multi-skilled on these teams. And that's about personal development, right? The team has more specialists on it than there are members of the team. That's another way to look at it. But how do I get myself in that place? I have to stop taking an individualist view to business. If I want to be a good teammate, I want a good team member, my first responsibility isn't to my work, it's to my teammates. If my teammates aren't productive, it doesn't matter how fantastic I am. It doesn't matter how amazing my work is. I'm a high performer. I get great stuff on my personal performance review. It's irrelevant if my team's not performing. Completely irrelevant. So the bottom line is, how can I help my teammates? How can I show them that I've got their back? How can I show them that I support them? How can I help them to develop themselves?
What aspect?
But my point, just let me finish on this, Joe, because I'm coming to a key point. That is personal development for me, right? Getting a good mindset and help creating a healthy team. I have to develop myself in order to support that. That's my key point.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, I was going to say, what are the how do you bridge the gap between the development of shamanic technique and then taking that into the business environment like you've just described? What is it about developing yourself from a shamanic point of view to being able to then apply that to your teams, to the business world and the environment that you were in? What's the bridge there?
It's core skills. It's back to Shilton and Gukuk. It's just core shamanic skills. I need to achieve chillicity. If I don't achieve chillicity, then how am I going to pick up on what's going on within my team? At the personal level, you can think of how a team operates at several different levels. There's the base level, which is the one that most people focus on. There's the analytical stuff, there's the process stuff, there's the resource-based stuff, there's the logic-based stuff, all that kind of thing. That's one level, but there are two other levels. There's the physical level. How do people on the team feel about being around each other? Do they feel a buzz out of being with their teammates? And you see teams. One of the things I've seen a lot is teams in very healthy environments. They seem to be very comfortable. Very healthy business environments. They seem to be very comfortable around each other. And you'll see things like high fives and sometimes hugs and that kind of stuff going on within that team. I know there is a fake version of that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the genuine article. In high-performing teams, basically, you'll see people being very physically comfortable around each other. But
a glue which connects everyone together.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a relaxedness. It's a holistic kind of feeling.
I've got your back, you've got mine.
Yeah, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So that's kind of the physical level to interaction with the team. But then there's also the kind of spirit level. There's the buzz. It's the working towards a common purpose and being creative around that common purpose, having a vision, having a mission, and working off values that the whole team believe in or are passionate about. That kind of top level of team interaction. This is where I see the most unhealthiness. And I'll give you an example of that unhealthiness. In government, I won't say which department, but several, you see this a lot. You see people, for instance, being shown a video of a high performing team. Yeah. So for instance, the famous video of the SpaceX engineers when the two Falcon Heavy rocket boosters were landing, and these guys are screaming, they're pumping their fists in the air. You say, there's a team who cares about their work, right? This is not a team who doesn't care about what they're doing. They're sort of high-fiving and hugging and all that kind of stuff. When a low-performing team sees that, and what I mean low-performing in terms of the culture of the business or the team that they're working in is a low-quality culture. You get a cringe reaction. Oh, that would make me cringe. I wouldn't like doing that. I'm uncomfortable with that. That's the miasma speaking. Yeah.
Yeah, but also you're just demonstrating to somebody, here's what you could be, do that, rather than going,
yeah, but it doesn't work, mate.
Here's how to actually,
but the point is the negative reaction you get there, sometimes, not always, is the same as the negative reaction. It's the same thing as the negative reaction that you get from friends and family when you start practicing shamanism. It's exactly the same reaction.
Upsetting
and so
the norm.
you have to, maybe sometimes it's not good to show them that stuff. Sometimes you want to be much softer than that. You want to, one of the things I've learned through my 20 years as a consultant is sometimes direct communication is not the best way because people put up barriers. The miasma puts up barriers. If you directly, so you might know what's a really good thing for the team to be doing around improving that team culture, but you can't communicate directly because if you do, the miasma will whack up some kind of metaphorical steel barrier in your face, like a security mechanism. Yeah. And you'll get nowhere and people will get upset. So sometimes it's better to sub-communicate. That is, you rather than telling them to do things and say things, you just keep asking different questions. That's one way to do it until they figure it out for themselves. And this is traditional. One of the, you know this from learning from me. Very often I won't tell you what to do. Sometimes I'll ask you a question. Yeah. Go off and then tell me what you think, what you've experienced. That you mentioned earlier, that is an example of that. Yeah. They have to think it's their own idea because if they don't, they won't buy into it. They won't have ownership of it. And part of a healthy team culture is ownership, or extreme ownership, if you like. That is really, really important for a healthy team culture. Healthy teams, the stuff that they do, it's their baby. It's what they care about. It's what what they're passionate about. And it has to be their own. It can't be imposed externally by somebody else. So one of the big mistakes, for instance, you can do as a leader in business is impose working practices on teams. That's idiotic. You will kill the team's productivity if you do that because you're taking them away their baby from them. You guys are now going to work like this. Yeah. This is how you're going to work. That's trying to manage people. You can't manage people. Quote Jim Rohn, managing people is like herding cats. People are not manageable. What you can do is manage the context in which the people operate. You can manage
you're stripping away people's individual
culture.
Autonomy as well. You're stripping away people's ability to think.
To the point where if you see them institutionalized, if they've grown up in a culture like that, say they went into a particular institution and they have an unhealthy culture in there, and they've been command and control since the year dot, and their ability has been eroded to think. They will sit, some of these, not all of them, to be fair, but some people will sit and literally not lift a finger unless somebody tells them to do something. That is about as unhealthy as it gets in terms of productivity.
And it's unhealthy for the individual as well. It's like
soul destroying.
It leads you open to things like, surely it leaves you open to things like depression. I don't know much about depression. I'm going to hold my hands up. I'm not going to go down that road, but surely that's an aspect of what causes depression. It must be this.
Yeah, it also leads to suppressive behavior. which is the reaction that you're getting for your family when you start practicing shamanism. For instance, suppressive behavior is, I'm uncomfortable thinking about this thing, therefore I won't think about it. Yeah. That introduces what I call non-subjects into your life. Yeah. That will make you an inflexible person, because there should be no such thing as a non-subject to you. It doesn't mean that you're happy about any of the topics that you're willing to address, but whatever topic comes up, it shouldn't make you uncomfortable. It shouldn't define you. Subjects don't define you. What defines us as human beings is our relationship with each other and with nature. To a certain extent, our values, what we're passionate about, what enlivens us, what gives us yokyusa, what makes us feel like a child chasing butterflies in the mountains. That's what defines us as human beings. All the way back, I forget what episode it was a very early one, we said, there was that, the thing about the comment about nature being red in tooth and claw, and out there it's a horrible story of death, disease, and destruction or something. And we said, well, if that's true, why are hunter-gatherer people always smiling?
Yeah, well, you see it in animals out there as well. Seals lounging around all day, and having a good old time, and go for a little bit of a swim. And it's like their life is like, from a seal's point of view,
fantastic.
It's fantastic until the moment
they have
you're
threats.
gone. It's like you live, you're happy, boom, you're gone.
Yeah.
And it's well, is it really sitting around getting anxious all day, every day, worrying about a shark coming along and eating it? No, I don't think so.
And that's a very healthy thing. Swimming in the sea is a very, very healthy thing. Just be careful if you're going to do it, though. That's be careful.
There's been a few more reports of that.
But and sharks and all that. But the thing is, if you live your life totally danger averse, if you live your life, and you see these that's another thing, advertising. The insurance industry has got a lot to answer for in terms of paranoia. All these awful things could happen to you and you need to have insurance and all this kind of stuff, and that whole industry is the whole industry runs off a negative. My first ever job was in that industry, incidentally. After I didn't stay in that industry very long, it has to be said. So I don't think it was even 6 months before I was off to do something more uplifting. That's probably the best way to put it.
Less soul destroying.
But that was my first ever experience of the world of work. Was in an insurance company. Yeah, I thought, goodness me, I might as well kill myself now if this is what work's like, and this is the rest of my life. Fortunately, I was wrong about that. It turned out not to be everything that, and I met Kato Sensei, and he showed me a different way. And later I met Sebastian and people who, and a guy called Ant in Birmingham, who are very experienced in business, and showed me that business can be an uplifting. It can be an uplifting, shamanistic, inspiring, joyful activity, but everybody has to want it to be, and everybody has to collaborate in that. And the problem with command and control organizations, if you're unfortunate enough to end up in one of those things, is all it takes is one person high up, and they will destroy that possibility. But fortunately, I've also gone in institutions which I can name, as Cambridge, obviously, the Land Registry, probably those are my favourites. In institutions where I've been in, where there is something of an uplifting culture, and they have, by whatever reason, they have managed to get a moderately healthy culture going within their institution, which is like an institution is pretty much the worst place to do culture, to do healthy culture, and they do seem to have achieved it, and so.
What specifically is it about the culture in Cambridge that you feel is more? Well, the people I work with.
I mean, because I'm involved in training and consulting and all this kind of. I talk to a lot of different people, and I do think it's also the town to a certain extent. I mean, obviously, it gets compared with that other town in the UK, starting with O. I don't know exactly. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but as soon as you see people a significant number of people who are able to put themselves into another person's shoes and show empathy, you're in a good starting point. It doesn't mean the culture can't be healthier. The culture can always be healthier. You can always make improvements in the culture of your group, your organization, your team, your tribe. You can always make improvements in the culture, and that's a mistake. Thinking you've got a great culture is like the worst mistake you can ever make. But as soon as you see people caring for their teammates, showing support for their teammates, putting themselves in another person's shoes, showing some empathy, you know that the organization has a reasonably okay culture. And I've seen that at Cambridge. I saw that at the Land Registry as well. Probably the two best institutions that I worked in.
Surprisingly,
and, I've worked in a lot of...
Fair enough.
Yeah. Who knows why? Who knows why? It's just maybe sometimes this stuff happens by chance, I think maybe they just got a good bunch of people.
And they'll go through cycles as well, right? I mean, it depends on the people.
Oh, for sure. And it depends which bit. These are all big organizations. It depends which bit of it and who you come in contact with and all that kind of stuff. But I do know that that there is in institutions in particular, which are the worst places to do culture by far. You can tell from the name, right? Can't you? Institution. Then there is a broad spectrum of starting point for culture, and maybe it's accidental, maybe it's random. But wherever you are on that spectrum, you can make improvements. I've seen improvements made in organizations with awful cultures. What I mean by cultural improvements, and cultural improvements always lead to productivity improvements because your culture is really your engine of productivity. That's why, organizations with healthy cultures like Toyota, like SpaceX, these type of organizations, they're always super, super successful organizations because their culture is so healthy and it just spontaneously gives rise to all that stuff that everybody else thinks is important, like great processes and stuff. If you look at Toyota in the late 1940s, early 1950s, that's pretty much what happened there. You had a semi-shamanistic guy by accident or by decree of the forces outside of Toyota, got himself in a position of responsibility there and started making cultural rather than process changes. And that would be Taiichi Ohno. Those cultural changes, they gave rise to incredible processes and resources and incredibly productive and creative organization has been fabulously successful and number one in their industry in the world. But a lot of people got it wrong. They thought they should copy the processes that those guys came up with. But those guys didn't come up with the processes. The healthy culture that they built spontaneously gave rise to those amazing processes, which were tuned to Toyota's market, which were tuned to Toyota's temporal context, which were tuned to the environment of today, this particular point in time. Copying Toyota's processes, I'll tell you something, if you want to be a successful organization, copying Toyota's processes of the late 1940s and early 1950s will do nothing for you today. But if you copy the culture that they developed during that time period, you will be a successful organization, for sure, 100% certain. Because pretty much I've never come across anybody who's copied that culture and allowed it to give rise to their own finely tuned processes, which are finely tuned to their market and context and all that kind of stuff, and to their people, and to their outlook, and to their values, and to their vision, strategy, and all that kind of stuff. Then you will be a successful organization. It's not an easy culture to copy because it's the same thing, isn't it? It's packaging, and that's what Taiichi Ohno did. Taiichi Ohno himself was a shaman, wasn't he? Of a sort. He packaged it up so that the people around him at that particular point in time could understand what he was talking about. But then but then the next generation and the next generation became a bit dogmatic about it. They started believing in Taiichi Ohno's processes. That's what the part of the lean movement was all about. It was one of the downsides of the lean movement. I'm not saying everybody in the lean movement didn't get it. Some of them did, but the majority didn't. And that's why these processes that they copied didn't work as well elsewhere as they did at Toyota. So, that's what he was doing. That's what Miki did. That's what I did with Amabella. Or we did with Amabella. I mean, you were involved in that. And that's what we still do. And one of the other ways we've packaged it up is the Woven Energy podcast, right?
I've been trying to work out, what it was about the Amabella packaging it up and relating it to this podcast. Because obviously it went Amabella and then it went this podcast. And I'm trying to think what aspect of Amabella helped me the most and what was the core general feeling around what Amabella was. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, at its core, it's about viewing the world through patterns and changes. And
Yeah,
what we did with this podcast, it's purely from a shamanic technique point of view. But with Arma Bella, we explored those patterns in a whole host of different environments and applications. So one of the applications was interpersonal communication. And so we had these ways of seeing interactions between people as patterns. And what that enabled us to do, for me, was to just take a step back and kind of see it in a different light, and see it with I can play with it now. It's something that I can maneuver, I can adapt and play with.
Yeah, and you did. You did it better than me, mate. That's why you're a famous YouTuber.
Well, that's part of it. But I think.
You're right. You're right. It is about that. No, that's just the Jing, isn't it? It's just the changes. That's what you're talking about.
What my concern was, people listening to this episode might be thinking, well, you're talking about Arma Bella, but I've no idea what it is. I wasn't involved in that. What on earth is this all about? Well, I mean, it's the same thing in a sense.
It's everything we talked about on this podcast, given different names. Yeah.
There was 3 aspects that you applied those. Right at the core of it are these 8 patterns. And we explore those patterns. We have explored those patterns in this podcast, but with Arma Bella, we explored those patterns in 3 specific areas, didn't we? We called it jet, rock, and ice. So we had the martial physical application of it. We had the interpersonal communication aspect of it. And then we had the shamanic aspect of it.
Yeah, that's right.
So perhaps this is material for another podcast, but those are very, very interesting and very relevant for me personally, and very, very important ways that we can explore those changes.
That's right. And that is the shamanic, shamanism comes in 3s, doesn't it? And the thing I like about those 3 different areas is that they're kind of, if you like, they are those lines that we were talking about, the physical line, when we talk about teams being physically comfortable with each other. That martial arts is a very physical thing, right? So that was to try and sort of cover off the physical line, understanding what are the changes in terms of physical interaction between people. Yeah. In terms of the jet and ice, in terms of ice, which was interpersonal communication and something or other.
Effectiveness.
Or some expression or something like that.
I think what we did was we went, ice sounds cool. We'll make up the
but
words
in terms
after
of that's about people coming together in productive work relationships and productive relationships. For instance, in a team in the world of work, that's what I do all the time. Is how do we make this team more productive? How do we get the people feel good about working with each other, being with each other? Because they are human beings, right? They're not resources. People, those people who describe people as resources, this horrendous
human
term,
resources.
Human resources. it's just horrible, and it's not as bad as racist terms. It's not on that level, but it's the same kind of thing, isn't it? It's heading in that direction, because people are human beings. They're people, and this is one of the things. This is the major shift in the cultural change that Taichung made at Toyota is people first. It's respect for people was the foundational principle on which all of his other principles were based. And you have to respect your people, because if you don't, you can turn them into unproductive drones. You want to turn a very productive person into an unproductive drone, start calling them a resource. Yeah. Very funny. I was with
a specific monetary value to you.
Yeah. I was explaining
you're a number in a spreadsheet.
Yeah. But the point is that in doing that, I have reduced your value to the organization. I've killed your creativity. I've killed your spontaneity. I've killed your ability to adapt to any kind of change that's going on. And most markets change all the time, right? Not everybody's in a position of being 100% monopoly within their market. And then not having to care about what their customers think. Those people are rare and they don't last too long anyway. So the point is that you need to treat people as people if you want to be successful as an organization. So that's the foundational principle of your culture. But what is shamanism about? Shamanism is, hey, go back 500,000 years. I'm a shaman of a tribe. My job's to keep these guys alive. they are human beings. I care about them. I need to even if I'm not their physical parent, I need to have a parental relationship with them. I need to feel like they're, to a certain extent, my children. I need to nurture them and bring them on, and I need to, what's the best way for me to do that? I gotta get close to nature, because the dangers and the opportunities to my tribe come from the same place. The dangers come from nature and the opportunities come from nature. If I get my head under the hood, under the covers of nature, and I start to experience the changes directly, then I'm in a position to help my tribe at the level where it matters, where they need guidance, is the strategic level. In terms of tactics, they're great people. They're multi-skilled. They're great hunters. They're great gatherers. They're great dancers, as those guys are. They're great singers. They can do, hummy look and all this. They're great at all that stuff. They don't need so much help with that. What they do need help with is strategy. Where's the best place for us to go to survive the winter? Where are the animals migrating? What's of danger to us? How can we mitigate that danger? All those kind of stuff. And what new technologies can I come up with? Bows and arrows and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be of help to them. That's going to assist them in their life. And then we all know what the problem was. The problem was one day a shaman just got too creative and said, what happens if I plant these seeds in this alluvial floodplain? And invented agriculture. And the rest is history, I think we've been over that one before. So maybe we could do that on here. We've said we've reached a point where further progress is going to be increasingly difficult in terms of...
I didn't mean we should abandon it. We should definitely keep doing it. But just with the caveat that it is difficult.
There are other things in the offing. There's a grove and stuff like this for covering that off. And I've done a sort of semi-shamanistic seminar over in Austria, and I plan to do another one. I mean, I would have done another one already. We had one booked in, but the whole COVID thing put a stop to that. And I in future, if I get more time, which I hopefully will, then I'm planning to do more of those things. So that's more one-to-one personal stuff that we can do, cover a lot of that other stuff off that's very, very difficult to put into words. But what I'm saying is, if we did do a podcast on jet, a podcast on rock, and a podcast on ice, then we would be covering shamanistic topics. We'd be using some Armabella-esque terminology, but we have been since the start. I think day one we were using Chalicity, weren't we? So nothing new there. I think that would be 3 nice podcasts to cover off, yeah.
I think from a personal point of view as well, my background, I wasn't I'm what psychologists may call an extreme introvert. So the whole ice thing, when that came along...
Well, you were when I met you.
I kind of still am in a way, but I've learned to deal with it. But it's like, that's an aspect of it that really helped me. And so, exploring that side of it is definitely a beneficial thing to some people, I think, just like maybe exploring rock and exploring jet would be. So, jet is, this whole podcast is jet, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would recommend that to people, even if you're not interested in the piano. Just have a look at the way Joe does Creative Piano Economy. Just watch a few of those episodes. Not necessarily, if you want to learn the piano, then great. But just from the point of view of how he does it, his way of presenting things, there's a spark there. And I believe this is one of the reasons why you've been successful, mate. There's a spark there.
Well, I get those comments all the time.
When I met you, there was less of that spark there. I'm not saying there was none. I could see potential, but that spark that you see wasn't as bright. That's probably the best way to put it.
I set out with the ambition to be conversational and be relatable in those videos with a very specific, I set out to do that. But what this stuff enabled me to do was be able to do that anyway, because how many people can sit in front of a camera and be like that, talk to an inanimate object with enthusiasm, with a spark. It's a trained, learned skill. It's not easy by any stretch. And so it was a definite progression to reach that.
Sure.
This stuff made me see that I had to do that,
but
and then enabled me to do that as well.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. There's a fear, and I think what getting involved in, as you saw, Armabella at the time, which is just shamanism, right? It's another word, one of the millions of words for shamanism, was instrumental in you reducing the fear of action.
Yeah, I'd say that. I mean, I think back to those days.
When you understand things, they're less scary, right? When you understand things, they're less scary. Doesn't mean they're not scary, just they're less scary. And that's what shamanism is about. It's about
you learn through experience and through repetition. You learn to embrace that anxiety and that fear. That, it doesn't go away. It just
but you understand it better.
You understand it, and you learn to deal with it.
But that understanding is not just in your mind, right?
No.
Mind, spirit, and body. Yeah, rock, jet, and ice.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fascinating time, but I think we can explore that more.
Well, let's do it. Let's do three podcasts on Armabella. Yeah, rock, jet, and ice.
Rock, jet, and ice. Sounds good. Definitely,
awesome.
Definitely sounds good. And I think,
and we'll get a lot of people saying, "Oh, I don't want to hear about Armabella. I just want to hear about shamanism."
Well, to that, I'd say
exactly.
it is shamanism, and it'll be useful because it's an application of what we've already talked about, and so it's always useful. And this is something I teach with Creative Piano Academy, right? The way to learn something is not to beat the same thing to death with a club. It's to have a goal, it's to have something you want to truly understand, and then you want to approach that through various different angles in. So the various different things you're practicing or learning, they want to have this goal as a commonality, but they want to approach it from different ways. And there's various studies done on that in terms of learning, how we learn. So this is a core aspect of how I try and teach creativity specifically with the piano.
So my first teacher, he thought his position was pretty much the more the better. The more angles you approach something from, the better. Of course, we have limited time in our busy lives, but that's a tall ask, isn't it? Another one of my teachers said to me one time, "You should master 3 martial arts in your life." I thought, oh my goodness, master 3, let alone just get okay at 3.
Yeah, I get this all the time. One of the questions I'm asked all the time, over and over again, is how long should I spend on this exercise? Yeah. And I just end up. People don't like nuanced answers, so I always have to say.
Here's your new exercise. I can answer that from years of shamanistic training. Stop asking that question. That's your new shamanic technique. Your new shamanic technique. But I can't say that to people.
I have to go like, right, look. Here's my new. I launch into a bit of a very nuanced answer, and then at the end I just go, right. But if you're not interested in that, spend 3 practice sessions on this exercise, and then just move on.
Never do what you don't want to do. Never do what you don't want to do. You go and practice. If you feel you want to go out and practice Homi Look all day long, go and practice Homi Look all day long. If you want to practice Bukik and Hengrig for 10 minutes, or you just feel you want to do it, then just practice it. And you'll know when you're done. It's honestly true. One of the problems with our exoteric lives is we time box everything, don't we? These lives make us so busy that we have to time box everything. We can't fit everything in, that's just a horrendous starting point for trying to achieve chillicity, let alone any of the high levels of shamanism. Just chillicity by itself, it's a horrendous starting point. Don't put timers on yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Do what you want to do. I often just grab my drum. It's hanging on the wall right here by my desk. I just grab it. And why do I grab it? Not because the alarm says I should, because I want to. Yeah. And I do a little bit of practice. Yeah, that's my shamanism. As the spirit takes you, but don't do nothing. Don't do nothing.
Well,
doing what you're enthused about. Do what you're enthused about, because that'll enthuse you further. And then as time goes by, you'll find you want to do more.
Well, there's a whole other conversation to be had about generating that spark to get up and do something to begin with. I mean, that's not a trivial thing by any stretch. That's something I wrestle with. I see that in a lot of people. It's actually getting the ball. What I found is it takes tremendous effort to start the ball rolling in whatever you're doing, even if it's something you enjoy. It's really weird.
Exactly.
Right? It's really, really weird. But it takes a lot of effort to get that ball rolling. But once you get over that hurdle, the ball starts to roll and it starts to gather, and it moves under its own momentum. But that initial amount of effort that you need to start something going And what I find just odd is that even if it's something that you're fascinated with or interested in, like sitting down and reading a book or a topic on something you're fascinated with, sometimes it's really like, I just can't be bothered. Even though it's something
because
like,
it's not
what
fascination.
Is that? What is that?
Yeah, but it's not fascination that makes you do it. It's the spirit. It's the joy that makes you do it. So here's one advantage you have with the Woven Energy podcast. This is episode 42, right? Mm-hmm. We've been quite a practical podcast. I know the stuff we haven't got out, but I would suggest that we possibly got more practical stuff out than a lot of other people that are covering the same topic. Yeah. So go back through the episodes. What do you want to do? Yeah. Look at all that stuff we've talked about. We've done endless techniques, absolutely endless techniques. Although in some ways we've just scratched the surface. What do you want to do? What do you fancy practicing? Yeah. And just do it. Yeah. Just do that. And don't put time on yourself. And don't force yourself to do it longer than you want to. Do something. But you choose what you want to do. Yeah. We've given lots of alternatives, haven't we? We've done loads for Chillisti. We did loads for Amska. We did loads for the later levels, moving into spirit dance and what have you. There's a lot of stuff in this podcast now. And although we don't get them out frequently, I do view it. We viewed it like as a resource to start off with, didn't we? Although we're not getting them out frequently, but I don't think we ever thought we'd ever do 42 episodes, realistically. So there's different ways to look at it. Look at this thing as a kind of encyclopedic resource. Rather than something where you just have to wait for the next episode, because I do know that there's a lot of people from some of the patrons, a lot of people who re-listen to the episodes, and those guys are getting something out of it. For sure, that's a good thing to do. Just re-listen to them. Yeah. I think there's enough stuff. For instance, I know there's lots of stuff we haven't covered, but in the stuff that we have covered, there's enough stuff to last me a lifetime in terms of practice. In terms of things to practice, I'll be more than happy with the stuff we covered already. But we will cover more stuff in future, and
we'll cover more stuff, and we'll also address. We have to address some of the things we've already talked about in a different medium as well, particularly in the Grove. And I think you and me will both agree that this podcast is a passion project first and foremost. It's not about It's not about the money. It's not about monetizing it. There will have to be a certain fee for the Grove, I would imagine. But it's like
depends who you are.
We're gonna try and fill up the Grove with as much more. Like we just talked about, angles into this stuff as much as possible, because we talked about a lot of techniques, and I think particularly in the early days. So when we talk about the Chillisti stuff and perhaps a few of the Amskar stuff, I think a lot of those are very clear.
Yeah.
When we get to the stage 3 stuff, it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more abstract. It's a bit more nuanced, and of course, then we're having to every single time we talk about it go, look, this is built on the foundation of stage 1 and stage 2. It's built on the foundation of Chillisti and Amska. So everything we're talking about is irrelevant unless you've actually got to that stage. So it's a tough one, but I think the more we do, the more we get out there, the more people can navigate through this themselves. But our job is to kind of get across as much diversity and as much angles into this stuff as possible, whatever resource that'll be. And this podcast is a huge part of it, and it'll continue to be so. But I think cool. Getting that Grove up and running is a really good thing.
Yeah, well, I will keep developing it, but that's going to have to wait till later when I'm just absolutely inundated at the moment.
You and me both, Dermot. It's a tough one. It's a tough one, but people have to be aware that.
But we'll keep it moving on. So for the next Woven Energy episode, I'm going to let Joe choose Rock, Jet or Ice. It's up to him.
Rock, Jet or Ice. Well, knowing us, it'll be a case of starting and they'll turn into more than 3 episodes. I can guarantee.
Oh, they will. Rock part 1, Jet. Ice will go on forever, won't it?
Ice is the one I'm most interested in exploring with you, because those techniques have largely dissipated from my active memory. They're in there, right? And I kind of do them, but I've got to a stage where I haven't done it in so long, and I haven't explored it in my own brain, my own mind in so long, that it's a bit more abstract as far as I'm concerned. So it would be lovely to readdress that and try and bring that back into my life. I mean, God knows I need it.
Sure. So, we would need to cover. We can use some Mongol terminology, So in the next one, we're starting out on what the Tolka, Nickdich, Totolo, Nasach, Surug, Egeldech, Terak, and Tengus. What do they have to do with people? Yeah. And you can call it ice if you want. It's a bit shorter, isn't it?
Yes. We'll just call it ice. All right, Damon. So that's been fantastic. I think we'll call it a day there. Thank you so much for listening. Head to wovenenergy.com/start-here if you want an exclusive Get Started episode where I try and prod Damon a little bit further than we normally do. Although I think these days you're a bit more open, aren't you, Damon? You tend to talk about whatever the hell you want now, so that's always good. When we first started, you were a bit more cagey, but now you'll just talk about anything, so that's cool. But go and check that episode out anyway, guys. It's a really interesting one. So thanks a lot for watching. Look out for our next episode, and I will see you then. Thanks, Damon.
Cool. Cheers. Thanks a lot.